or yet another powerful indication of where British politics could be heading over the next few years. And if my instincts are right, then you could see Labour do something truly desperate. And watch till the end of this video to find out whether you agree with my thinking on this or not. Because certainly we are living in a country now in massive decline. We look at the net zero green agenda, the deindustrialisation of our country. It is an absolute tragedy that is making us less competitive, that is putting up energy prices for businesses and, of course, for ordinary people. And we've also got now totally out of control knife crime. I actually think that one is pretty easy to solve. You just say anyone caught with a machete running around the streets receives at least a 5-year to 10-year prison sentence, no ifs, no buts, and make an example out of these people. And then in terms of the illegal migration boats crisis, well, look, clearly the government have no faith in themselves that they're going to stop any of this. We've now got tenders being put out, it seems, to provide asylum accommodation, transport, food, security, welfare monitoring until at least 2036, maybe even 2039, according to the Express there. And so you've got a system in this country now of excuses, of speeches, and nothing changes. We saw it for many years with the Conservatives. We're seeing it again now with Labour. And that is why it is very, very imperative indeed that actually Reform Today, Danny Kruger, Zia Youssef, putting forward the reform plan for government, that the civil service will be directly answerable to politicians who will be able to hire and fire, that the civil service will be cut dramatically, and that critically, there will be legislation day one of a reform government with Nigel in Downing Street, ready to go, legislation drafted, ready to go, no excuses, let's get on with it.
Now, we know for a fact, and have plenty of data to support the notion, that the instruments of state are unfit for purpose. And this has no doubt been a real significant driver of the disconnect, the discontent between voters and Westminster. The learned helplessness that has built up election after election. Voters vote for the blue team time and again, and they get the opposite of what they voted for. And frankly, based on a year of Labour government already, we don't need 14 years, we already have a conclusion. You vote for the red team and you get exactly the same thing, just faster.
That we will do is to grip the civil service itself. It is simply not acceptable, and Reform UK will not accept, that ministers have to take advice from and trust the execution of their decisions to officials who answer to different bosses than them and whom they cannot, when they need to, quickly remove from their posts. So we will bring more expertise, advice and executive capability from outside government to serve in Whitehall. We will reform the Civil Service Code to ensure that officials at the top of the civil service, and certainly those at the centre of government, are directly answerable to politicians, including for their jobs. And let me be very clear, the growth of the civil service will be reversed. Now, after falling in the wake of the global financial crisis, the headcount of the civil service rose again after Brexit. Shame on the Tories. And it passed 500,000 in 2003. So we put the civil service on notice that under a reform government, we expect the headcount to fall dramatically. And it won't be like last time under the Tories, when they reduced numbers and froze pay, and the civil service just gave themselves all promotions up the pay scale, and therefore pay rises, and we ended up with a bigger wage bill than before. You can see there this absurd transformation of the shape of the civil service from a pyramid to basically a pillar, with more people at the top than at the bottom. So that has got to change. And as we do that, as we cut the system, cut the headcount, we can do something else. And this is another thing I hope the civil service will be ready for if we win power. In the last 30 years, as the size of government grew, so did its physical footprint, both beyond London and Westminster. Britain used to administer an empire from a couple of buildings grouped around Downing Street. In the 1820s, Sir Robert Peel ran the Home Office with 17 officials. Lloyd George delivered the People's Budget in 1911 with a treasury of 26 people. And of course, in those days, Westminster was a residential district. Now, in 2025, it's a wasteland of acronyms: the MOJ, the DWP, the DFT, the DFE, the DHSC, the MHCLG. all housed in these great glass and steel towers, mostly empty, because everyone's working from home. So if we look at this map here, you can see at least 5 buildings whose leases are all coming up for renewal before the end of the next Parliament. And a Reform government will not renew those leases. There's something in the region of 100 million of annual savings right there, just in those buildings. £500 million over a 5-year term. So a more concentrated government machine will be cheaper, leaner and more accountable to ministers, Parliament and the public. And our ambition is to make Whitehall, Whitehall again, to restore the civil service to the street called Whitehall.
Well, that was Zia and Danny Kruger preparing for government. That's the job that Danny has come into Reform to do, and he presented it. I love the analogy. He said that Reform is like a pirate ship, but what we have to do is to turn it into a ship of the line, a proper, full-going naval ship, capable of going into number 10 and absolutely reforming and changing the way that the civil service operates and what it costs as well. I think it's very interesting that the media were there and they took what he had to say very, very seriously, asked both of them questions, and you can see that the idea of us winning the next election is no longer a joke to anyone.
Now, in terms of how it's looking, this really is remarkable. Not only are Labour on their lowest ever support recorded by YouGov, the Greens are on their highest, and just look how close together now. You've got Reform way out in front, but just look how close together now Labour, the Tories, the Greens and the Lib Dems are. So tiny swings there could actually see these parties buried. And in terms of how that particular polling plays out as a seat projection, where you see there the Lib Dems could actually overtake Labour to become the opposition. You'd have Reform the biggest party by far, and the Conservatives reduced behind the Greens and the SNP. So I put it to you, and let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below, whether you agree with this or not, that if that polling remains that volatile and that closely bunched together in terms of those around Labour, then what you could see is a desperate roll of the dice that Labour then try and change the voting system. Now, my thought on this is, because you're seeing it across Europe at the moment, is that that would mean Reform could win the most votes, but you could see the other parties then group together, so you could then have a coalition of Labour, Lib Dem, Green, SNP, then conspire, despite Reform winning the election in terms of the most votes, to try and instead form a government out of that instead. Could you see the Labour desperation get to that level of panic that they then try and change the voting system at last minute if all these parties fear a total wipeout? As I said, in that particular projection under first past the post, therefore you'd have Labour as the third party. But look, I think this shows you how volatile things now are. One thing is remaining a constant though, and that is a big Reform lead in all of these polls. Please do let me know your thoughts on all of that in the comments below. Please do whack this video a quick thumbs up, I'd really appreciate it. And of course, as ever guys, cheers for watching.